Pastor Mark Biltz here from Shaddai Ministries. Thank you again so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe and share. Also, please like this video, and we would love to hear your comments. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye. Now, look at Genesis 17:17. Abraham falls on his face. It had to be hard at 100 years old. I don't know if I'd be able to get up. But it says, he laughed, and he said in his heart, shall a child be born to him that is 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? Okay, so Abraham is now 100 years old. So how many years has it been since the promise? 25 years. Okay, I am now going to also reveal to you guys something exactly that doesn't say it plainly in the Bible, but it says it plainly when you understand the timeline. So let's look at this timeline. In Genesis 29:18, if you remember, Jacob is working for Rachel for 7 years, right? And because he hasn't married anyone, no kids are born. Then we see in Genesis 29:27 through chapter 30, verse 26, all the kids are born. In that it was a 7-year time frame. And then we find in Genesis 31:28, he works for 6 more years for livestock. So he was there serving Laban 20 years is what the Bible says. The first 7, there were no kids. The second 7 were all the kids. And the last 6, there weren't any kids. You following me? Okay. So with that in mind, and knowing that Leah gave birth first, and she had the first 4 kids right in a row, you can develop a timeline of how old all the kids were. And here is a list where it says the child and has their name. And the very next column is after the 20 years, how old they all were. Okay? We know that Reuben would be 13 because what's 20 minus 13? 7. And he had worked 7 years, got married, and now has the kid. And then we know that Simeon was the next one born, and then Levi was the next one born, and then Judah was the next one born, okay? So this gives you how old all the kids were. You see, and Joseph was 6 years old. Then, imagine this, remember that Levi and Simeon killed all the Shechemites after they had raped Dinah? When you do your timeline, they were only 16 years old when they did that. Okay, and then when they sold Joseph, they were in their 20s when they sold Joseph. When they entered Egypt, and then when Jacob blessed them before they died. You can have all of this, but I want to point out 2 important things. Levi was 45 years old when they went into Egypt, and Joseph was 39. How do we know that? The Bible says Joseph was 30 years old when he appeared before Pharaoh. That's what it says. And then we know we had the 7 years of plenty. That's 37. Then his father and brothers came, and he says there's been 2 years of famine. That's 9. So that makes Joseph 39. So when you insert all these things, you can get how old everybody was. You following me? Okay, so now, get a load of this. Let me see. In Exodus 6:16, it talks about these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. You see that? He had 3 kids. And the years of the life of Levi was 137 years. So if you know Levi was 45 when he entered, and you go 137 years, you can see what year it happened that he died when he was in Egypt. You following me? Okay, now look at Genesis 50, verse 26. Joseph died being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Well, guess what? If you know Joseph was 39, you can take a timeline 110 years and know how long he was in Egypt. Well, guess what? Joseph was like the youngest, but Levi lived longer than him. Levi lived 6 years longer. Joseph dies at 110, but Levi doesn't die until he's 137. So in Egypt, Joseph dies, all the brothers, everybody dies, but Levi's still ticking. Okay, he's still going on. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some things. You just can look up at the screen now, and I'm going to try to make these slides available if you want the slides. But here we go. 430 years, we know, was from the promise to when Moses took them out of Egypt. Does everyone agree with me? Okay, it was from the promise, and I'm going to prove it to you if you don't agree with me. Okay. We know the promise was made to Abraham when he was 75 years old, which is in Genesis 12, 1 through 4. Everyone believe that? Well, guess what? The promise begins when Isaac is born, when Abraham is 100, Genesis 21, 15. All of a sudden, Isaac is born 25 years later when he's 100, correct? Well, we know that Isaac fathered Jacob when he was 60 years old, according to Genesis 25, 26. And so now Abraham dies at 175 years, which is Genesis 25, 7. It's 100 years since the promise. You following me? Okay, but Abraham is 175. But it's been 100 years. This chart has to do with how many years since the promise. Okay, now we go over here. We know that Isaac dies at 180 years old. Well, if Jacob and Esau were born when he was 60, that would make Jacob and Esau 120. Does everyone get the math? That's Genesis 35, 28. Well, you take 180 when he dies, you add the 25 years before, because Abraham was 75, give the promise, he was born 25 years later, that makes 205 years, right? We also read when Jacob appears before Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, man, how old are you? He goes, I'm 130 years old. Well, guess what? That is exactly 215 years since the promise was given. Okay, so here in Genesis 47:9, we see Jacob's 130. Well, guess what? This is an exact mirror. 430 divided by 2 is 215. So if 215 years biblically have gone by and it's a total of 430, how long were they in Egypt? 215. So we know how long they were in Egypt now.